So admirably the first meeting she's missed all year, but it also means it's the first meeting that I've had to run, so patience is a virtue. If everyone would join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, notice of executive session. We did not have one tonight, but we did have one on July 31st to discuss legal matters that you haven't been informed of yet. So just wanted to make that point. Up next is the consent agenda. Any commissioner wants to remove from? Well, I was going to get public participation afterwards, but any item a commissioner wants to remove from the consent agenda? Any item the public would like to remove from the consent agenda? All right, public comment?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Leslie Flick, and I live at 6 Cushman Road, which is in Ward 7. And I attended the last Board of Commissioners meeting where Steve Norsini gave a detailed and thorough presentation of the July 9th storm and the impact it had on the community. As I was sitting in the audience, I got to thinking about what can we do as Radnor residents to do our part to mitigate the runoff happening after these numerous storms we continue to have. And may I suggest to the Board of Commissioners to re-implement the rain barrel program that they offered years ago, where I believe we partnered with Do It Best Hardware and offered rain barrels at a discount after residents participated in a workshop to learn more about rain barrels and the positive impact they can have not only to mitigate the runoff, but save residents money because you can use the rain to water your plants and trees in your yard with free water that you've collected in the barrel. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Note that there will be the ability to speak to any issue as we go through the agenda.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Ellis, and I live at 908 Lewis Lane in Rosemont. The proposed ordinance 2023-6 regarding Garrett Hill dining is still saying outdoor dining should be 50 feet from a single-family dwelling. The single-family dwellings in that neighborhood start on the next block. The people directly affected live in two family dwellings, which are twins, and they will be affected, and they're already affected by the live bands and the game nights at the bars. So I hope you would change that as it was suggested before. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you. All in favor? On to the business agenda. The first item A is just a caucus. It's the preliminary final land development plan approval for Villanova University parking. Who would like to start us off?
Hello, boss man.
Evening, I'm Nick Canoia, representing the applicant. Go ahead, you want to put it?
I do, but I just put it on here. Oh, perfect. Okay. Thanks.
This is the land development plan for Villanova for the HSB garage. I think you all know the garage is located on North Hythen, across from the Davis Center and the Pavilion. There's an existing parking structure there currently. This is replacing the existing parking structure. And Mary Lou, where'd you go? Why don't we show the existing parking structure? Okay. This is what is being proposed. Again, of course, the stone.
You want me to go right?
Yeah,
So
just
here's-
go.
Here's the location of the existing garage here on campus, which is right on 9th Avenue. And this is the new proposed garage location, very similar location.
And that's what it looks like
Right,
currently
this is-
on the left.
Well, right, this is the existing garage, the way it looks now, and the proposed structure there. The first slide showed you exactly what the garage is going to look like.
And what this is doing is replacing the existing two-story structure with a three-story structure. We did go to zoning hearing board. Actually, before we went to the board, we took away one of the requests for variances, which was height. So we did not need a height variance from the zoning hearing board. We did get 3 variances. One was a setback in common with the railroad. It was no closer than the existing garage. 2 was a setback from 9th Avenue, which again was no closer than the existing garage. And the third one was the size of the parking spaces, which was consistent with every other garage on campus. They received shade tree approval. They got unanimous approval from the Planning Commission with the 2 waivers, the 2 waivers being the 500 feet, indicating utilities within 500 feet, and preliminary final type plan. And we are requesting preliminary final. You recall, this is on Villanova's campus. It's replacing an existing structure. So really, the infrastructure is already there for the project. As I mentioned, there was 2 waivers. The review letters are basically drafting comments, and we're in agreement with everything regarding the drafting comments, and those that weren't drafting, we will comply with them.
Does anyone have?
Yeah, just 2 quick questions. How long do you expect the project to take, and just the impact on the community traffic-wise, if there is any, or like where are you storing the stuff, the material? Can you do it on campus?
Yes, we can definitely do it on campus, and we're looking at probably a year from start to finish.
Okay, will there be any road closures at that time?
There should not be. There may be some intermittent deliveries of precast, but typically we would do that with Radnor Police.
Okay, so you'll contact them and they'll.
Absolutely.
write the
Yes.
residents down. All right, thanks.
Any other commissioner comment? Any public comment? We'll see you in September.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
All right, next, we have B and C, which are interconnected. B is ordinance 2023-03. This is an advertised hearing for the consideration of an ordinance of Radnor Township, Delaware County, Pennsylvania, amending Chapter 280 zoning, Section 115.4 of the Code of the Township of Radnor by permitting outdoor dining in the Garrett Hill, Conestoga District, to permit outdoor dining in the planned laboratory office zoning district as an accessory use, and to permit outdoor dining as a special exception at existing licensed non-conforming food establishments. I'd like to open this hearing. Mr. Rice, you want to start us off?
Sure. Thank you. So ordinance 2023-03 was advertised for hearing tonight. Since the advertisement went out, it has been in front of both the Delaware County Planning Commission and the Township Planning Commission. And as a result of the Township Planning Commission, they issued a list of 7 or 8 recommendations that would revise or add the ordinance that has been advertised. For all intents, this particular ordinance, it's my recommendation that the board table this ordinance because you have a new ordinance with the Planning Commission's recommendations wrapped into it coming up next. So for purposes of this, I mean, certainly take some public comment if anyone has any public comment on this, but this is not going to be adopted tonight because there's another version, an updated version, that is next on the agenda to be introduced. So my recommendation is the board table it for tonight.
No, I just wanted to know if you wanted to move.
Any comment?
Move to table.
Commissioners, you want to move to table second? Take a vote. All in favor? It's tabled. Number C, or letter C, ordinance 2023-06 is an introduction, amending the previous ordinance that I read so long. Do we have a
Can I
motion?
just-
Yeah? Oh, go ahead.
Anyways, let me just, a little bit more background. This ordinance has what the staff, taking the planning commission's recommendations and the revisions that were done to the previous ordinance, because the revisions are relatively substantial, the state law requires this to be reintroduced. This will go back to the Township Planning Commission, and this will go back to the Delaware County Planning Commission. So tonight, it's not for adoption, it's just for introduction. Anyone that has questions about this ordinance substantively, you can certainly address them tonight, but it's going back to the Township Planning Commission, and then it's coming back to the Board of Commissioners, probably in October. It'll take that long to go through this process again. So that's just a background, Commissioner Myers, and as I said, it's just introduction for tonight.
Do we have a motion for the introduction?
So moved.
Second? All right, do we have any board comment?
I have a lot to say, but I actually would like to hear from my fellow commissioners first, so it's not a back and forth, and I can address any points. And then I do have comments to people in the audience here. I know some are for it, some are against it. Again, having that open dialogue, I think it's best. So, because this is kind of it's my ward, and something I've been working on for several years. If you guys have any questions or comments or concerns, I'd like to address them before I have to say what I say.
Any comment?
Well, I'll just be brief. So the first thing I want to do is thank our staff, John, Rice, Bill, and Steve, and Peggy. They've all helped help kind of shore up this this ordinance. I'd also like to thank the people from planning. We have MJ, the head of planning, as well as was it Miss Nat? Okay. Steve. Sorry. So this is something, as many of you know, I've been working on for a long time. It's been going back and forth and back and forth. There were some issues. It wasn't strong enough. There were some residents' concerns, and that was brought up at the planning meeting last a couple weeks ago. So we shored this up with I think 8 or 9 things that is going to make it a little bit more restrictive for those neighbors that worry about that. And we're here tonight, and let's have that open dialogue. So if there is something that we need to amend, we can amend this. So we can amend it for planning. Our planning as well as Radnor's planning. But generally speaking, I think that outdoor dining, I'm a broken record at this point. I think it's important. It's to keep the business district viable. I think the residents love being able to walk to these little mom and pop corner establishments and to eat outside on a nice night like tonight. I mean, last night was absolutely beautiful. And to take that away from some of the residents, I think it's not good. We've heard from planning. We heard from Woo Kim. He's been on planning and is a city planner himself. And he said that to a certain extent you need to look at what the residents want and balance that with the business community. So if there are any questions, I am happy to answer them offline. We have 2 of the business owners here tonight as well. I think that they may if you want to reach out to them, they're happy to talk. And there'll be another planning meeting in September. So if you have any more questions with this, feel free to come get a hold of me or track down MJ or anybody, and we can talk to you about that. But I think voting on this is important for the community, important for the residents. important for Radnor. And hopefully we can get the support. And again, commissioners, if you're here, I know we're missing 3. Wow, we almost don't have a quorum. If you want to reach out to me as well, I've reached out to you with some letters. We've heard from a lot of letters from a lot of people. And yeah, I want to hear from you. I've been wanting to hear from you, and that's it. So, yep.
Public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak to this? Okay. Then we'll call a vote on the introduction of this ordinance. All in favor? Aye.
My name is Dee Delaney. I live at 229 Williams Road. And the last time I was before the Board of Commissioners was the May 22nd Board of Commissioners meeting when Commissioner Farhi introduced Ordinance 2023-03. During that meeting, he said, and I have quotes, "I believe this is something that the neighbors want, including myself. The majority want it." He showed a screenshot of an informal Facebook poll, which I was told was several years old, and where people did not identify where they lived or provide a signature. He reported that his poll showed that it was either 41 or 43 were for it and only 3 against it. He also stated that our businesses, in quotes, whether in Garrett Hill or Wayne, need to be able to compete with Uber Eats, Lower Merion, Devon Yards, or King of Prussia. Throughout the meeting, he repeatedly said, "We're not asking for anything more, just a level playing field. Limited outdoor dining is good." He also stated when it comes to setbacks, the neighbors that have concerns don't live anywhere near where the restaurants are. And so the neighbors who live near the restaurants that live within 300 or 400 feet, and this is all quotes, "I have never heard anything from them and they seem to be for it." Still in quotes, "Just having an equal playing field for all the businesses in Garrett Hill and Radnor and beyond is fair and equitable." At the time of that meeting, I expressed my concerns and offered to do my own petition of Williams Road, which is directly affected by everything that goes on at the corner of Conestoga and Williams Road, near where the 3 bar restaurants are located, just to see for myself if what Sean said, what he believed was true. And here is the result. So we created a petition, and the petition ended up going far beyond Williams Road. The petition states at the beginning, "We, the undersigned, oppose the adoption of Ordinance 2023-03 to permit limited outdoor dining facilities in the Garrett Hill-Conestoga Road District. If adopted, this ordinance will, 1, deprive us of our current property rights to peaceful enjoyment of our properties, without the noise and disruptions associated with outside dining and drinking, up to 50 seats, 50 feet from our properties. 2, impose unfair, inadequate, and deficient setbacks that are vastly different from the setbacks designated for all other township residents. 50 feet for Garrett Hill, up to 500 feet for all other township residents, thus blatantly discriminating against residents of Garrett Hill. 4, impose greater shortages of residential and business parking. 5, increase traffic congestion in already overloaded and dangerous intersections along the Garrett Hill-Conestoga Road District. 6, diminish our property values. 7, it opens the door not only to existing establishments, but to all other future outdoor dining establishments, as this zoning change will affect the entire Garrett Hill zoning district and all surrounding properties. And finally, it adversely affects our unique sense of place. Outdoor dining does not fit with the character of our respected Garrett Hill. Please do not vote to adopt this detrimental and blatantly unfair ordinance, whether it's the 2023-03 or 2023-06. And I calculated like the numbers on the signatures, and I segregated the house numbers that were most closely affected by whatever happens in that district from the other neighbors that wanted to support us outside of that. And the most affected neighbors closest to the district to sign this petition, the number is 80. The total signatures for people, that also includes people outside, is 134. So please take into consideration, would you want to want to buy a property 50 feet from outdoor dining? Does anybody in the rest of the township would do that? I don't think so.
I'm going to ask for a point of order from, are we having public comment? And this was voted on. So I mean.
You're having public comment because even though the commissioner called for public comment and no one got up after a long, long pause, no one got up for public comment, you voted. But my advice is take the public comment. This is just an introduction, and then the board will re-vote after public comment. But I want to caution everybody, 5 minutes. I'm going to be the timer. I'm the parliamentarian at the meeting. So let's keep it to 5 minutes or less. These issues are not new issues. It's only introduction. This will be back again if it's introduced for Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. So you will have more opportunities for public comment. So anyway, the answer is yes, we're having public comment.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Patty Shader Barker. I live at 920 Lewis Lane.
Thank you.
I'm asking you not to vote to introduce Ordinance 2023-06. This is a hastily written, poorly worded, and again, patently unfair ordinance. Most everybody does not oppose outdoor dining. However, outdoor dining in Garrett Hill without adequate setbacks is a surefire recipe for ongoing long-term conflict. Why weren't Delco Planning's recommendations with regard to setbacks and dwelling types taken into account when drafting proposed Ordinance 2023-06? Delco Planning states specifically, setbacks should be examined so as to be evenly and equitably implemented township-wide. Additionally, they say, the setback should apply to any and all types of residential units ranging from single-family detached to apartments. Peter Nelson, Township Solicitor, notates his support of this in the marked-up version that was attached to the agenda of 2023-06. Why wasn't his recommendation taken? Transparency? How did this document end up like this? It seems that the proposed ordinance 2023-06 was crafted with the intent to take into consideration the recommendations set forth by the two planning commissions. It has failed miserably at that. Garrett Hill is a dense neighborhood comprised of single-family, two-family, and semi-detached homes. Mr. Nelson and Mr. Norsini were mistaken when they stated that single-family dwelling is interpreted as all types of dwelling. The Township Zoning Code defines a number of different dwelling types. The current outdoor dining regulations list all of those dwelling types. Why aren't they similarly listed in proposed Ordinance 2023-06? This sets up ambiguity that is preventable and unnecessary. The future impact of this ordinance seems not to have been considered at all. Garrett Hillians have continually been treated as second-class citizens in Radnor Township. In 2007, we decided to take action. The community rose up and demanded to be involved in the rezoning process the township had initiated. The community, with the help of township staff, a planner, and an architect, worked tirelessly to craft ordinances that reflected the unique character of Garrett Hill. It was unprecedented. During that time, outdoor dining was thoroughly reviewed. It became clear that it was not an option for our neighborhood. Businesses and residences are too close together. Commissioner Farhi accuses the neighbors of being unwilling to compromise. That is untrue. Here's a suggestion. Allow outdoor dining on Conestoga Road, not to the side or the rear of the buildings. Utilize current existing dining standards and setbacks in Garrett Hill. Flippin' Bailey's or any other business can apply for a zoning waiver or variance. That would level the playing field, as Commissioner Farhi keeps requesting. This sloppily worded, hastily crafted, patently flawed proposed ordinance should not be introduced. I don't understand what the rush is in trying to push through something this important. Something smells fishy. I would plead that you listen to the 100+ Garrett Hillians who signed the petition handed to you this evening. They do not want outdoor dining in their neighborhood. I believe none of you would want an ordinance of this type passed in your neighborhoods either. I respectfully request that you do not vote to introduce the proposed ordinance. Thank you for your time and for your service to the citizens of Radnor Township.
Any further public participation?
I'm going to go as quick as I can. Dear Commissioners, please do not introduce proposed ordinance 2023-06. This ordinance is still flawed, detrimental, and patently unfair. Only now it's worse. F1, change closing from 10 to 9:30, a half hour. Does this do enough to mitigate the burdens of putting your little ones to bed or yourself if you have to rise in the early hours due to the necessity of shift work? I think this is a distraction from the real issues. At RT Planning, this F2. At RT Planning, there's a reference made to a sliding scale. A sliding scale already exists in the current outdoor dining ordinance. What is proposed here is no longer 25% of indoor seats, but now 40%. Why? And even more egregious is now there is no limit on the number of outdoor dining seats. Why no limit? F3, outdoor dining areas should be closed when the kitchen is closed. While I appreciate the intent that outdoor dining should not be solely outdoor drinking, this provision is totally unenforceable and of no effect whatsoever. F4, setbacks for all other township residents, 500 feet. Proposed for Garrett Hill, 10% of what is considered adequate for everybody else, 50 feet. And that setback for only single-family dwellings, no setbacks for two-family or semi-detached. In Pennsylvania, if a standard does not exist, the property owner prevails. To not include two-family or semi-detached is at best an oversight. We saw this in 2021, and yet here it is again. Delco planning recommendation, the setback should apply to any and all types of residential units. This is not open to interpretation. No standard, no setback. For this reason alone, you must not vote to introduce ordinance 2023-06. Even with the protection of adequate setbacks, the prospect of outdoor dining is just not physically possible in Garrett Hill given the close proximity of residents to the GHCR district. If outdoor dining were to be sanctioned in Garrett Hill, shouldn't the existing outdoor dining ordinance protections protect Garrett Hillians as well? Why should Garrett Hillians be denied the peaceful enjoyment of their properties when the protection of adequate setbacks are provided to all other township residents? F5, a 10-foot wide visual buffer will do very little, if anything, to mitigate sound propagation. So more parking spaces will be eliminated for the buffer. Does that mean less seats, or will F8 prevail? 50 feet is too close, buffer or not. F6, if you are going to allow smoking, allowed. If you're going to prohibit, do so. This is just silly. F7, while again I appreciate the intent of not permitting outdoor drinking, how do you enforce snacks and define small amounts of food? What if you're not hungry? Can't have a beer while everyone else eats? Separate tabs for alcohol and food? Who's going to check them? What consequences will result if a violation were demonstrated? This is totally unenforceable and therefore of no effect whatsoever. F8, why is this language even in here? It creates ambiguity. It is unnecessary and should at the very least state that if outdoor dining occupies or eliminates existing parking spots, the number of seats should be reduced accordingly. F9, increasing the number of seats without increasing parking is ill-conceived. While one indoor seat for one outdoor swap sounds good on paper, it is unenforceable and therefore of no effect. It would only serve to increase the severity of the parking shortage in Garrett Hill and lead to conflict with attempted enforcement and competition for parking. F10, noise ordinance. The standard is unnecessary noise or sounds which are physically annoying, not decibel limits. How does one demonstrate physical annoyance by sound? Our existing noise ordinance does little or nothing to mitigate outdoor dining and drinking disturbance. Why not rely on the reasonable setbacks in our existing outdoor dining ordinance? Delco Planning Recommendation 2023. Setbacks should apply to any and all types of residential units, absent from 2023-06. Permit renewal process should address nuisance issues, absent from 2023-06. Setback provisions should be consistent and equitable for all township residents, absent from 2023-06. It is understood that on-street parking is deficient in the Garrett Hill area. Any outdoor dining proposal that proposes additional seats while utilizing parking for said dining area must provide adequate parking solutions. Example, legal shared parking arrangements with a nearby off-peak organization.
Mr. Barker, 5 minutes, please wrap up.
Okay. These are the provisions that are actually the heart of the issue. What is getting lost in all this is the effect zoning will have on future plans for development. The current zoning supports and protects mom and pop establishments and residents as well. You must consider what happens as businesses are sold if properties redevelop. It is irresponsible to zone for what might not happen. Responsible zoning considers what could happen. When mom and pop move to Florida, what happens then? Most importantly, there exists considerable confusion with our RT Planning Commission, our Ward 7 Commissioner, with regards to the process. Adopting this ordinance creates by right dining for the GHER. It will not be subject for
Mr.
any...
Barker, thank you. Time's up. Way over 5 minutes.
In my opinion, it is simple. Ask yourself, would I stand for the township imposing
I'm sorry,
zoning
sir.
that would sanction outdoor dining and drinking from 8 in the morning till 9:30 at night for an unlimited number 50 feet from my backyard? How is it okay to impose this on any of the Garrett Hill residents? Respectfully, please do not adopt this deeply flawed, detrimental, and patently unfair ordinance. Thank you for your consideration. And you too, John, thank you.
My name is Harry Fury, 130 Garrett Avenue. I wasn't prepared to talk tonight, so I'm just going to wing it. I live 100 yards from the intersection Conestoga and Garrett Hill. During the pandemic, we had outdoor dining. There wasn't any issues. I actually find it very quaint. I think we compete with Wayne. I mean, we got to take an Uber down to Wayne, you know? I mean, I like it. If you're concerned about noise and congestion, how about 140 Garrett Ave to 140?
Speak into the mic, sir.
Sir, you got to address the board with your public
sorry.
comment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
thank you.
the bulk of the noise and congestion come from, come from 146 Garrett Ave to 140. Bands, parties, noise. I never hear anything. I mean, I'm in bed at 10 o'clock, but I never hear any noise in the bars. I'm 100 yards from there, okay? So the quaintness, the property value can only go up. I totally disagree with that. Shortage of parking, I can't comment on that. But the congestion, that's ridiculous. There's no congestion up there due to outdoor dining. It's ridiculous. It's an embellished point by people who don't know what they're doing. If I need to get a petition going, I will. I think it adds to the property values and the quaintness of our town, and I'm proud that we're actually considering it. The setbacks, I can't talk on that. The buffer, have you seen what Exit 13 has done? Beautiful. I mean, flipping Baileys, do stuff like that, I mean, it's gorgeous. I mean, I'm all excited about it. And I don't drink that much. I might go there to eat, and that's about it. Okay. Sorry, I was just taking notes. In regards to the open hours, 9:30, I agree. I think that's a working. I think that's a working time. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. Managing the when the kitchen closed and stuff like that, I'm totally confident with Gene and Angie and Luciano that their staff will manage that. Smoking, couldn't care less. I don't smoke. Do whatever you want to do. Have at it. And that's about it. Sorry, I wasn't ready to talk, but those are my thoughts. I live at 130 Garrett Ave, 100 yards from the bars and restaurants. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public participation?
Thank you. My name is Gene Mitchell. I'm the owner of Flippin' Bailey's with my wife Angie and the Garrett Hill Ale House. For years, we've requested this outdoor dining ordinance along with the Garrett Hill Overlay District codes to be modified. These two issues, as drafted today, are not consistent with the balance of the township ordinances for the rest of Radnor Township. These two issues also significantly impact the Garrett Hill section of the township in an unfavorable way. Sticking with the topic tonight and outdoor dining, there are several things I would like to point out. During the pandemic, the relaxed guidelines allowed us to entertain a neighborhood crowd who felt safer eating in an outside venue with open airflow as other communities have without restriction. This community is very tight-knit, and the outdoor dining did allow friends to see each other outside during these difficult times. In addition, this has allowed us to remain competitive with the other restaurants in Radnor, who again have little restrictions. We've been in business since 2006 in that neighborhood. We've been long-standing supporters of the community, fair business owners, and well-known employers of local neighbors and families. Those petitioning against us do not represent the common voice of the community, but they do represent outdated views and opinions that restricts growth and future opportunity for small businesses to survive. A loud, squeaky minority should not influence the silent majority for the betterments of the Garrett Hill community and allow us to come up to the levels with the balance of the township. Just to address a couple things that were said earlier. On the noise, this will close at 9:30, and I can assure you that myself and Angie, and I am sure Luciano, will comply with those restrictions. And they are in accordance with the township rules for noise ordinances. As far as parking and traffic congestion, we're not adding any extra seats. I believe the ordinance says we will curtail indoor seats when the outdoor is opening. And these same people that are bringing up the parking and the traffic oppose the township purchasing the lot to add outdoor public parking for the community. That could have been resolved if there was not so much opposition. The note about other outdoor dining establishments in the area, I don't know where these could go. It's not a very big community. The 2007 overlay zone, during its formulation, not one business owner was engaged during the process. That overlay is truly based by a few, not a testament to all. Why should Garrett Hillians always have to go to Wayne just to sit outside? We're just looking for some parity with the balance of Radnor Township. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mari Schaefer. I'm on Devonwood. I don't live near Garrett Hill. I'm just going to address the smoking issue that came up. The science is pretty clear. There's really no safe level of secondhand smoke inside or outside. I'd just like you to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tim Braithwaite. I live at 246 Hardwick Lane and I just recently got a job at Exit 13, right on Conestoga Road, and I don't see why there should be an issue to have outside seating whatsoever. I don't think anybody will be sitting outside after 9:30, and I actually walk to work every day, and I know how many of our patrons walk just to come in to see us, and I think it would be very good for the community for us to have a little bit of more space, because there's not so much space, right off the street. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lucho DeFelice. I own 3 parcels in Garrett Hill, 910, 912, and 26 Wentworth Lane. I was born in Garrett Hill. I was raised in Garrett Hill. I even went to school in Garrett Hill. There used to be a lot more people outside. I kind of miss those days. I'm also the owner of Exit 13. I am for and support outdoor dining. Every day, we have normal people just want to sit outside. It's beautiful days. We're not trying to create any noise. We're not trying to create any problems. They just want to have a burger, a dish of pasta, whatever, outside. It's not a big deal. We just want to, quote unquote, be on the same playing field. Some people say, well, I don't live in Garrett. I grew up in Garrett Hill. Some people say you don't live in Garrett Hill right now. Well, I'm building 2 twin houses on 26 Wentworth Lane. And I am going to move my family into one of those houses. I have a 5-year-old daughter. She's going to have to go to sleep every night at 8, 9 o'clock. If I didn't have faith in the ordinance, I wouldn't be supporting it. So I just wanted to state that I'm all in favor. I will do everything in my part to make sure that the community continues to thrive. It's very hard to own a restaurant today. You can ask any restaurant owner, let alone in Garrett Hill. I invested millions of dollars into Garrett Hill. I could have done it anywhere in the country, but I chose Garrett Hill because I believe in Garrett Hill. Every community evolves over the years. There's always going to be changes. If you don't evolve and you always stay the same, you're going to be left behind. So we can continue to stay behind like it was in the 1800s, but we have to move forward. It's almost normal. You go to a restaurant. If there's space, if it's allowed, the right parameters in place, there should be outdoor dining for those who qualify. So I support outdoor dining.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Call the vote.
Yeah, revote.
I was advised to vote again.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to revote. Because there wasn't any public comment
All right. Well,
prior to the vote.
Then fine, prior to the vote, then I'm going to ask for 2 minutes to.
Sean, just
Just
take
vote.
the vote.
All right.
It's introduction.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
4-1 passes the introduction. All right, next we have the advertised hearing. I'd like to open on ordinance 2023-04, amending Chapter 270 of the Radnor Township Code. Vehicles and Traffic, Section 270-28, parking prohibited at all times on the east side of Wentworth Lane from the northmost point at intersection of Dreer Lane for a distance of plus minus 325 feet. Can I have a motion? Second? Any board comment?
Yeah, this is another Garrett Hill thing. So again, I want to thank Superintendent Flanagan as well as members of staff traffic that came out. Mr. White, was Mr. Norsini. Steve, you were there, and everyone that was there to talk about the, and if I'm missing anybody, please, my apologies. But yeah, this is something that parking on that street was an issue. Mainly because of it's a very narrow street, so parking on both sides would create a potential situation for emergency responders. So again, they're going to block off one side. We had a neighborhood meeting outside, and this is what we came up with. And I think all the neighbors are all right with this, so I don't see any problems, and I'd be happy to listen to some of them if there's any issues.
Thank you. Any further board comment? Any public comment?
Good evening. My name is Samuel Horsey. I live at 52 Wentworth Lane. By parking on the odd side, the even side, I have problems getting in and out of my driveway because I can't see what traffic is coming in either direction on Wentworth. And if I pull in, I got to watch how I back out. I got to back out slowly and hope nobody hit my car. If I do the opposite, it's the same thing. So I don't know what solution can resolve this situation, but something has to be done because one of these times, somebody on the even side of Wentworth is going to be backing out or pulling out the driveway, and somebody's going to be flying down the street and crash the car. So, like I say, something has to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public participation? All right, call the vote. All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Next is Resolution 2023-76, consideration of settlement agreement with the Jewish Federation of Greater Philadelphia for property located at Bryn Mawr Avenue, consisting of a 34.49 acre parcel, number 36-05-02858-1. Do we have a motion? A second? John, you want to start us off on this one?
Thank you. What is in front of the board is a settlement agreement, a plan, and some of the elevations of the proposed senior housing development for the Jewish Federation property on Bryn Mawr Avenue. The background of this is the Federation filed a zoning hearing board application seeking approval of the use, which the zoning hearing board granted. They also needed some additional variances for some dimensional criteria. Some of that was granted, 2 of them were not granted, and as a result of that, the Federation filed an appeal to Delaware County. The Township intervened and had settlement discussions with the property owner, and what you have in front of you is the result of that. In effect, the site plan is a site plan. It is not a completed land development plan. If the board approves this, the Federation will go through the land development process with the Planning Commission, and that'll come back to the board as a final land development plan. The part of the issue that the zoning hearing board had was with the facade of the building. and the elevation of the building. That has been modified to meet that issue and concern that the zoning hearing board had. There's also there will be a what I call a pilot agreement. So taxes will be paid to the township for the proposed use once it's up and under construction and open. The proposed use, and I should say that Mr. Falcone is here, who represents the developer. Mr. Westrom is here, who would construct this particular project. And if there's any specific questions, they're here to answer those. But the proposed use is 219, let me find it, 149 total units. I had the wrong development in my mind. It is under the township zoning ordinance, a senior living facility. I think the model, I'm familiar with the model because I was involved with one in Montgomery County. The model is apartments and a memory care unit and some first floor, I think you call it the Main Street facility where there's a pub, there's a post office, there may be other commercial uses for the residents. The average age, and I'll ask Mr. Westrom to correct me, the average age of the residents here would be 83. So the amount of additional parking or driving that would be generated from this particular use is minimal. Obviously, we would not expect any school-age children. But that's what's in front of the board. The settlement agreement, if the board votes to approve this, will be filed with the court. The court would have to ultimately approve it. And then the developer, Western, would file their land development plan. So any questions for me from the board?
Board have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. So this has totally bypassed the board. This went to planning and zoning and everybody. I knew nothing about it, very little. We may have talked about it once or twice in executive, but nothing really, I don't really know too much about this. So, I mean, I'm for it, but none of this has really come to the board at the board level.
Until tonight.
Until tonight. And that's why I want to, everything that was done either with other committees or done in executive. So it's just known that to the people here that it's a pretty big settlement and it hasn't come to the board. So the people at home that want to know this, that's the situation. That's all. That's the only comment I have.
Any specific questions for the? Okay. So I guess we should take a vote. All in favor?
A motion
I'm
and public
sorry,
and
public.
public comment.
I did a motion.
Okay.
Public comment, I'm sorry.
Thank you. My name's MJ Freeman. I live at 10 Radnor Way. I also chair the Radnor Planning Commission, although I'm not here in that capacity tonight. I want to talk about settlement agreements in general, and also, obviously, we're here for this settlement agreement. Settlement agreements, as you probably know, are problematic. And they're problematic for a number of reasons. First reason is that they basically eviscerate our zoning code. They also disempower the bodies that you've appointed to shed some sunshine on development in Radnor. And to be quite honest with you, they circumvent due process. The next logical step for the Jewish Federation in this particular case is a zoning appeal. In fact, they took it upon themselves to do just that. But there's other things that the Jewish Federation can do in order to bring an acceptable plan to Radnor that actually has the oversight and the kind of accountability that we expect as Radnor residents. most importantly, settlement agreements, and I think Commissioner Farhi brought this up. They create an appearance of backroom dealings that nobody can look at. You've got the haves who can negotiate a settlement using attorneys, and you have the have-nots who have to use the normal lane to get their development approved, which is a route through the Planning Commission and the Zoning Hearing Board. And for those have-nots, there are no settlement agreements. We do have a process in place here in Radnor. Developer can come in front of the Planning Commission. They can discuss a sketch plan. They can then bring formal plans in front of the Planning Commission, then the Zoning Hearing Board, have their matter heard and looked at. To be quite honest with you, if they don't like what they see from planning or zoning, which this applicant certainly did not, they can appeal, or better yet, they can bring revised plans for consideration in front of those two bodies, and then, of course, to you. To me, settlement agreements, and this comes from my experience as also a former zoning hearing board member. They really cast a veil of darkness on the process that is completely unnecessary. I urge you to reject the consideration of this settlement agreement with the Jewish Federation and the developer, and have them use the normal process that we use to get developments approved in Radnor. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any further public participation?
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephen Varenhorst. I live at 329 Conestoga Road in Wayne. I'm an architect. I'm also on the Planning Commission. And by the way, I'm not opposed to development. As an architect, I'm all for it, of course. And I'm certainly not opposed to the use that was proposed for this site. I think it's a great use for the site, and it makes a lot of sense. What I am opposed to is, in the resolution really sanctions a method of development that I don't think we should be sanctioning. That is, the approach that the developer took on this project, as it was presented to the Planning Commission, is that they had a plan for an existing facility from another location that they wanted to reuse and impose on this property. They set out knowing they violated the zoning code, and they set out with no regard for either the character or history of that property. They set out with the idea that they were going to tear down a building by one of America's famous architects. And so I think that, and the other issue that this type of resolution brings up is that it just undermines the validity of the other commissions. I mean, I sat and we listened to the developer and the Jewish Federation make their presentation. We had a number of, I think, productive and positive comments to their plan, and nothing. You know, they completely disregarded that. So I just don't think development by variance is an approach we should sanction. So, thank you.
Let's make a quick point of order. I'm happy that Dave's getting up. I would actually like to hear from I don't know why you didn't speak after John. I think that this is putting, I should have heard from John and then you and the presentation as opposed to.
So I think maybe Jay and Steve were just a little faster than I am. I'm slowing down, I guess.
All right. So I may have some more questions. I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but
Sure.
I can't vote on something if you want exemptions and exceptions and there's a blank screen. And like I said, this has never gone to me. We've talked about it maybe upstairs once or twice, but never
right
where, and there is that appearance.
So let me I'm Dave Falcone. I'm here on behalf of the Jewish Federation as part of this application. Just kind of a little bit of feedback on kind of how we arrived here and why this board hasn't considered this plan as of yet. But to John's point, the land development process moves before the Board of Commissioners. This was a zoning application that came before the Planning Commission multiple times, and then ultimately the Zoning Hearing Board. This was a development that, once it moved through to land development, would come to you all. The reason it hasn't been discussed at this point in front of the board is because it's with respect to litigation. So when we lost our Zoning Hearing Board application on the 2 points that John had mentioned, we filed an appeal, which was absolutely our next step. After that becomes an active litigation, I believe this board handles those discussions in executive session because they're matters of litigation. I believe that's kind of the process. I know that's on the boards I've served on, that's how we discussed litigation. But by no means is this plan nor this project any type of a plan or project that has not been brought to the township, to the community, to the residents that surround this property. I know that there have been discussions with staff, and I believe this has ultimately been brought to the board as part of the settlement discussion that brought us here tonight. Now, the specifics of those discussions is not for me to know. That's between you and your solicitor in executive session. But I will explain the process, and I should say, you know, I've been in front of Steve many, many times and have a great deal of respect for him, both as a planning commissioner and as an architect. So our history goes well beyond this project. I must say, though, I don't believe that an appeal and ultimately a settlement in any way eviscerates zoning ordinances, nor do I believe is it an end run on development. I think it is a natural process that I have seen in my 20 years of practice often take place when there is litigation around a denial, whether it be a land development denial or a zoning hearing board denial. It is a method that is used not just in land development and in zoning, but in all facets of litigation. And it does provide a benefit to both the developer or the appellant and the appellee, because it avoids the necessity of litigation when the merits of the litigation are felt by both sides to be something they can reach by resolution rather than through court order. And oftentimes, settlement agreements, and in this specific instance, I believe you end up with a project that is ultimately better in the long run when there are disagreements over certain aspects of the development, which led to a denial. And in this instance, that is exactly what happened. There were concerns that were raised, and the developer took those concerns and said, well, there's an opportunity here to move this project forward in a way that is responsive to some of the township's concerns. Now, if you win on an appeal, you are appealing a plan that may not have been as good as the settlement plan, and that is the nature of a settlement. There's bargaining chips on both sides. The developer can come and say, we can make these concessions in order to develop this plan that maybe is something you, township, feel is a better outcome. And that's what happened here. If you move forward with an appeal, you get the plan you appealed from. And maybe that's not the plan the township wants to see or the boards want to see. And one of the things I heard tonight, which I think is just a little bit disingenuous, is that this board, or this applicant, I should say, was not responsive to comments that they got from the Planning Commission. That's simply not the case. They heard those comments and they came back. What is true is that some of the Planning Commission, and it was a split vote, did not appreciate this project, did not like this project for a number of reasons. And that is absolutely their prerogative as a board in this township. But when it moved forward and it went through to the Zoning Hearing Board, the issues were smaller, and they did not really circle around some of the concerns that were raised by planning. Some of those concerns were adopted in the settlement plan in response, but they weren't zoning issues. And so the primary zoning issues here were encroachment into steep slopes, which was a result of a building length. And so when we sought relief to encroach into steep slopes that we believed were man-made. This township does not consider man-made slopes as being absolved from consideration under the zoning ordinance, and a building length that was directly derived from the existing slopes. For anybody that's been to this site and understands the site, they understand that there are slopes there that were a result of construction of some buildings. So it's it's a process that took place over a number of months that was considered by staff. I believe it was brought to this board. It was considered by the applicant. And this is a very normal process, not just in Radnor Township, but across the Commonwealth.
Were there the same man-made slope issues at the Fox Lane site?
Very
do I
similar.
remember?
They were the result of construction of buildings that predated ordinances.
Do you recall what the Planning Commission's recommendation was with respect to that site? I know it ultimately obtained approval, but.
On the Fox Lane project, I know that the zoning hearing board did not like slope disturbance. I don't remember. I think the Planning Commission may have supported us. I don't recall. It was before MJ's time. So I just don't remember. I apologize.
Commissioner, if I may, so at Fox Lane Homes, zoning hearing board allowed the steep slopes from the parking lot. They said that they concurred, I believe, I'm paraphrasing that, yes, they would have been man-made. Where they did not obtain relief were the steep slopes around all the split-level homes and some of those areas.
That's right. Yep.
Is there dissent here over whether the slopes are actually man-made, which it sounds like that was the issue, not whether a man-made slope would be one?
So actually, on the Fox Lane, Jack, this township agreed that those slopes were man-made as part of split level, but the problem there was the zoning hearing board did not believe it had a significantly detrimental impact on the developability of the site. They believed that the slopes surrounding the parking lot and the entrance created a significant impact to developability, and therefore they allowed for disturbance there. And that was after adjustment. I think we lost a house in that process. And as part of this, we lost some units as part of this process.
So again, my issue now is, again, what I said before, and there's a dark screen. Villanova has come here, and as you know, I have not always agreed with them today. But they come here with sketch plans and they say, hey, can you show, can we show it? And sometimes we don't want to see it. And I'm like, I don't need to see this again and again and again. But I have not seen this. And you have two dark screens here, and we're talking about slopes. We're talking about parking. We're talking about all these things. And I just don't see a sketch plan or blueprints or anything. And it's not that I'm necessarily against this, right? I am probably for this, and I am. I don't necessarily know that I can vote for it as it is now.
Right.
I mean, my wish or to get me on board, come back, table this if you can, come back with a plan, let me see it, get the full board here, get the commissioner whose ward it is, come up with a little bit of presentation so I can see it. I'll sit down with you, I'll talk to you. I can go to planning, and if any of the neighbors are upset or have concerns, talk to them and just flush it out so it is a little bit more transparent.
Sure.
I just don't see this as transparent.
Right.
And it's not that I won't vote for it. I don't feel comfortable voting for it as is, not with the screen. And even if you put it up now, I think it's kind of tainted at this point. If you could come back and start fresh and at a different level, like I said, you're probably gonna have my support.
Yeah.
But I just, like I said, me talking about it upstairs and not talking to you. Again, it's a transparency issue on my point.
Sure.
So,
And so the only concern, just so you know, Sean, and I appreciate that, as you know.
You see what I'm dealing with in Garrett Hill, and the neighbors want transparency, and I
Sean,
get it.
Sean, just so we're clear, there is a plan set. The exhibits to the settlement agreement.
I know they're in my packet, but I want to see them here, and I wanted to.
Well, I'm just so everybody's clear that there's a plan set, and the elevations that show the building, they're all part of this, and they're in the packet that the board's had. So
Sure, but I think it should be memorialized from Dave, from the builder.
I understand,
Sorry, no, and it should be up online and memorialized in video, so people can come back and they can digest it.
And the further issue is President Mulroney, who's not here, this is in her ward, she's a strong supporter of this, and has been involved in every step of the way in some of the conditions. So just,
I don't doubt that, but if there's a question that I have, John, after this, then I want to talk to Maura. I know Maura's for it, and like I said, I'm not necessarily against it, I'm just uncomfortable with the transparency aspect of it. And if it's not going to be detrimental to wait another week or a couple weeks or so, then put it up, give the presentation, and like I said, you'll probably have my vote. I'm just uncomfortable as is right now.
Understood. And so I just don't want you to think we were trying to make an end run. So
No.
this, normally, Sean, we obviously would bring everything before the board, but so this was a zoning application. So it just hadn't gotten to you guys yet, this process. It was all zoning, so it's zoning and planning, which is where we were doing all the work. We haven't started the land development, which then comes to you guys, and we just can't get there without zoning.
Yeah, so it's like kind of putting the cart in front of the horse.
Yeah.
And they only approved the use, right?
No, so zoning approved use and height.
And height, okay.
Yeah. I said height.
Sorry.
Use and height.
Use and height,
Yeah.
Because I knew at one of the meetings, somebody said the length of it was like the length of the soccer field.
So we sought length, height,
And it's steep
slope,
slopes.
and use were the areas of relief we were seeking.
And only got use.
And height.
And height, thank you.
Yeah. So, and as you're aware, in your ordinance, there are ways to adjust your perception of length by offsets in your building, and that was some design issues. We actually got a lot of that feedback from Stephen during the Planning Commission meetings on better ways to address the length. If you go back and if you had watched the Planning Commission, really the significant concern was on length, because that created the perception of a large building. And again, I think that's a lot of where Stephen's expertise comes into play as an architect, right?
Sorry, I was at that meeting.
Yeah.
And unit-wise, you're at 149. Were you at higher before?
We were higher than that.
What was it before?
I don't know what the exact number was.
Unit-wise.
The initial 55, I think 155. This is just, this is the plan, I think that's in your packet, one of the plans that was in there. That just shows your steep slope areas, those colors.
The next one shows like the back half of the building is on the steep slopes. Yeah, that one. Not that one. Not the pink one. The other one shows steep slopes.
This is a slope plan.
Sorry, where the building is. And you can see the slope lines are going through the building. No. That one, is that one? No.
I think it's this one here.
Nope. Turn, that one. All the lines underneath the building that are tight together, that's the steep slopes. Yeah. It's just that, that section, the one that's away from Radnor Avenue.
Correct. That's where the steep slopes are. And for those of you that are aware, there's an existing building there, a school, an office building there that sits. And when it was constructed, those slopes were made so that the building could be flat. If you look at the site, it's that way all across the site. And the slopes go down into a pond in the back. And so we walked the site with, I believe, I think a handful of Planning Commission members came out and walked the site with us. I know Matt Gola spent a lot of time out there looking at the slopes with us. I think staff's been out there a lot. Part of the concerns we had on this site is it's just encumbered in significant fashion by slopes that work against what we believe to be kind of the type of development that's needed here. So that's ultimately what propelled us forward to go to the zoning hearing board. Ultimately, the zoning hearing board did not see our argument. But again, if you watch the zoning hearing board, a lot of that had to do with the length of the building. That if the length were somehow adjusted, the slope impact would be less. So a lot was derived from the length of the building. And so much of the redesign came around. There was no offset. I think when the Planning Commission really saw this the last time, there was no significant offset to the building out front. And there are provisions in your code, they're not specific to this area, that talk about offsetting the building to reset the length situation. So we went back and pursued that, worked with staff around that, as well as materials and so forth, and then ultimately design of the building to specifically address that. And we worked with Maura on that. So that's how we got here. I don't want you to think that this somehow there was some attempt to avoid you guys. And I mean, I've been
I don't
around long
think
enough to
that.
know.
I just want it for you and for everybody
Yeah.
that it's a good process. If we have whether you disagree with the head of our planning commission, if he's coming here saying that he's uncomfortable with it,
Sure.
I do need to take that into consideration,
Understood.
weighing what is best for the community,
Understood.
as well as what you say.
I get
I mean,
that.
like, if this could be brought back September and it's not going to affect any plans, like, that's fine. I need to digest this with you. Like, I can't go to zoning because I can't adulterate myself. And, let planning run planning, and if planning has something to say, they'll let me know, or they'll come here.
Sure.
So, and then me talking to you, yeah, I talk to lawyers and about business, but again, it can be perceived as
Right.
that issue that we're talking about. So that's my comfort level. I mean, I'm gonna, if John, if we table this and this comes back in September, they don't need to, there's no advertising associated with it.
No, it's not an ordinance, it's just a
Okay,
resolution.
So my comfort level, and to the board, is to table this, come back with a little bit more, I hate to say dog and pony show, but, so I can digest this, we can talk, I can talk to MJ, we can talk to MJ and you, and if the three of us want to meet, or I can go back and forth on but, whatever. Just then, I'm gonna be feeling a lot better, and again, you'll probably have my vote,
Sure.
it's just not here, and I do want to vote for this, I just, not in this way, and I think that, so I'm going to make a motion to table.
Well, there's been a motion, I think, already made, so.
To table?
There was a motion, I believe, to
No.
approve, and it was seconded.
Well, I'm going to make a motion now to table.
Yeah.
Is there a
Sean-
second?
Sean seconded it.
There's, to approve, but in light of what's going on
Well,
now.
vote on the motion to approve.
No, we voted on the
There's a
motion
second.
to bring it up. I'd like to make a motion to table. I need a second, someone wants to give me a second. Okay. And now we call the vote.
All in favor of table?
Aye.
Sure, I'll do it.
It's tabled.
3-2, table. Do we need to vote on the first motion?
Initial motion was approve the settlement agreement. That was the first vote, but you didn't take that yet. If you want to reconsider the motion to table, you can do that and move on then to a motion to approve. But the majority just voted to table any further consideration of the plan. Sean sort of jumped into the motion to approve with his motion to table.
Well, hold on, I made a motion to approve after hearing what I've said, and the
But you
order's,
still-
the order's all messed up. Now,
You still have to vote on that initial motion.
I would prefer, Dave, if you want to get back up, not to reject you right away and just make this motion to table, so it's not rejected, and you can come back, and then we
My
can
only
table
question,
it.
and I understand that,
Just bring it back.
I don't know how, when there's a motion, I just think it's hanging out there. There's no action on the motion.
We're tabling it. We spoke, I mean.
That's fine, so we
I
can
mean,
come
if you
back.
want- I don't want to vote no on it.
I understand.
If you understand, I don't want to vote no.
I understand.
I just want you to come back.
We are going to come back, and we have to come back.
I'm sure you will.
So,
Okay.
So I would have read this, as Commissioner Larkin was just saying, that the motion to table was actually a motion to table the motion to approve. And with that tabled, I think we'll bring it back at the next meeting. Right. It is now.
So since it's been tabled, it'll come back in September, right?
All right, next is item F, ordinance 2023-05, an introduction, amending Chapter 270 of the Vehicles and Traffic, Section 270-10, prohibited right turns on a red signal. Section 270-11, prohibited turns at intersection, and Section 270-16, stop intersections, specifically to add Montrose, Roberts, County Line, Eagle, and Beech Tree. Do I have a motion to approve the introduction?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any board
Yeah, I'd ask Chris to, if you want to, Chief?
Chief, you want to start us off?
Yes, Commissioners, as you are aware, all of our ordinance, from a certain type of prohibitive sign, such as a handicap parking spot, to all our signalized or these particular intersections, we are simply updating our code, which approximately, Mr. Rice can correct me wrong, every 5 years we codify our traffic code and reassess, but this would just be putting in line and formally placing in our ordinances these respective traffic changes. If you'll notice, County Line Road, Mr. Norsini and the Police Department work with Lower Marion Township, and that road has been redone with a signal and no right turns, or right turn only from those locations. And then Beech Tree at Eagle is a new stop sign that was placed in.
Thank you for that, by the way. The residents are extremely happy.
Any other board comment? Public comment? Let's take the vote. All in favor? Aye. Aye. That's unanimous with Jake off the table. All right. Item G, authorizing the township manager and solicitor to negotiate a contract with FHI Studio to complete the Radnor Township Comprehensive Plan Update Project. Do I have a motion? A second. All right.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. While our representatives from FHI Studio make their way to the microphone, I'd like to provide the board with a quick summary of the detailed email sent to the board back on August 10th, as well as give the public a little context on what has gone on over the last few months. As the board is aware, back in May, the township mutually agreed to end the engagement with our prior partner in this. It was at that time when we were deciding how to regroup and move this extremely important project forward. President Mulroney had sought interest from members of the steering committee on a subset group to help with the selection of the next firm. At the same time, Solicitor Rice and I were determining the best way to move forward in terms of RFPs and trying to get interest to finish the project. It seemed obvious at the time that the next phone call to make was to the firm that did so well last summer, going through the township's RFP process then, going through the selection committee that the board had assigned at that time, and then ultimately making it as one of the finalists to present to the commissioners and the public last, I think it was June or July. The board held a special meeting and heard presentations from all the three finalists, including FHI Studio. In reaching out with them, interest was there to continue or to engage with the township to continue this project forward. We, in early July, met with members of the subset of the steering committee, which included Mari Schaefer, who is here tonight, as well as MJ, who we've heard from earlier tonight as well, and Ken Kearns volunteered some of his time to help participate with that as well. We did an interview, a special interview at night with that group, heard a presentation from FHI Studio on their more of a high-level process. For those of us that were here last summer, it was a recap of what we had heard then. But it just helped to reaffirm our confidence in this firm and their expertise in this area. The ultimate conclusion from our subgroup was that there was a high level of confidence to move forward with FHI Studio. That confidence being said, we reached out to several of their references and prior engagements, received glowing reviews from media, the town of Monroe, West Hartford, Connecticut, all specifically complimenting FHI Studio on the public engagement perspective, project organization, meeting the project objectives. In terms of cost, the proposal is $180,196. That includes a little bit of contingency in the event that additional engagement is needed or something comes up during the course of the next few months while we're working on this, that there is some money built into there to be able to make those decisions. When coupled with the money spent to Michael Baker for the time that we spent with them, we'll be a little bit over the $200,000 that was budgeted by the board, probably in the 210 ballpark. In terms of timing, why this is in front of the board tonight, a couple things. First of all, being that this group has presented publicly a year ago on the same process and the confidence that we had at that time, in addition to the time we spent over the last couple of months really drilling into the proposal and getting a high level of confidence that this group is able to step in and carry this with us going forward. And then most importantly, being August, the opportunity for FHI to get ramped up quickly and be out in the public in September and at a couple significant fall events really will align well with their goals on the public engagement end of this project. And that really starts with the WBA's Fall Fest in mid-September. So that was, again, that's why this ended up on this agenda, give FHI time to prepare and get ramped up and ready, and hopefully there at that night or that day with a very popular event. So that's kind of the long-winded background story on how we got here. It certainly has not been a linear path, but very, very excited and thankful for FHI's continued willingness to partner with Radnor Township, as well as the time volunteered by Mari and MJ and Ken to help evaluate and get us to where we are tonight.
Thank you. Would you like to present something? Speak?
Yes, let's see. And this is on. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. We presented the interview materials as well as information packet to the commission, and so we'd like to take this opportunity to see if you have any questions on any of the content of those documents.
Any board questions?
I have a few. First of all, thank you for coming back. It's you don't want to be a second to the dance, but thank you.
You're welcome.
It says a lot. So just to John or to Bill, was this solicited out publicly that we were looking again, or we didn't need to do that? Did we need to have an open bidding?
So Solicitor Rice and I had that exact conversation. Two things. First of all, since they had already gone through the public process on the same project, that checked that box. And secondarily, this is a professional service and does not specifically require a public bidding process.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that, okay. And I know it's late to the game. It's great that you want to, hit the ground running here. Do you have an ETA and just a rough ETA when your plan would be finished? If you could let some of the residents, I know it's in the packet, but let some of the residents know what your timeline is.
Absolutely. I can start, and my colleague Zainab Kazmi can join in. But we presented in the series of documents a 12-month project schedule. We would anticipate, if authorized, that we would hit the ground running tomorrow in order to prepare a public involvement plan as well as the materials that would be needed for the September 17th Radnor Fall Festival, which we would hope to attend as one of our early outreach activities. We plan several other activities with the steering committee in advance of that event, so we will be busy, but we are ready. Zainab, anything to add?
Sure. I'll just add that we really like to get started really quickly with outreach, because when we go to a public meeting, when we develop our questions, even when we're looking at our data, we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach. We understand what the community's looking for, what they're needing, and then we focus in on that. So by the time we get to a public workshop, we'll have a lot of background from not only the virtual workshop, but the pop-up events, and all of the conversations we'll have leading up to that. So that builds trust with the people we're talking to. It gives us the opportunity to really understand what their priorities are and what possible recommendations are starting to form early on, and then we go from there.
I'll say, and I don't want to speak for the other two people that were on that steering committee initially, but I was certainly impressed. It was a 1 or a 1A on who to pick. So good luck. You have my support, and while I'm still on the board, if I can help in any way or afterwards, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Good luck. Yeah.
Any other questions for FHI? And, oh. Any questions for Mr. White?
Yeah, so I have a couple questions for the administration. Bill, you had alluded to payments to Michael Baker. Like, what have we given, or what did we pay to the previous consultant?
Yeah, we're a little over 20,000 right now, with some dispute over the final bill, in the interest of full transparency.
Okay. Any of the work that they've accomplished, or is it reusable?
Yes, that's a good question. So in leading up to tonight, a lot of the branding is going to stay the same, and we've got some tote bags that we ordered and received that will be valuable in terms of public outreach. And then obviously there were a few focus group meetings that occurred in April. We have all of the feedback from those focus groups that will be handed over to FHI, and so they'll have that input as well.
You haven't seen that data yet, have you?
We haven't reviewed it, but we've received information from Bill. Once we're authorized, we will move forward with reviewing.
Okay. And so what was it? So Michael Baker came on what month? What was the time period?
If you'll accept approximates, it was last September, because we had the public meeting last summer for the presentation. I think by the time that we got through and had a resolution for the board, or actually it was the same wording that's on tonight's agenda. I think it was late summer.
Okay. And what was the original time frame?
Their project was approximately 12 months as well. But honestly, there were a few months ramping up at the beginning, if you'll recall, and nailing down the steering committee that delayed. So we were probably going to be 14 months under that proposal anyway, because the meetings and the outreach didn't really start until January.
So how far off track are we from the original time frame? Are we about 10 months?
10 months off track? No, I think we'll be 4 to 5 months behind.
Okay.
Just another follow-up. None of the data from Baker, none of that's proprietary. Like we can give them that data. I don't necessarily know that you should have it or you want it, because I don't want you hearing another steering committee's group and then feeling that, well, let's throw a lot more money after bad. Well, if it's 20,000, it sucks, or whatever the number is, eat it. But we're going to hire you, and if you don't want to look at that data, I mean, I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but you have your own plan. Obviously, we parted ways. So it's there, but we're hiring you, and I don't want it to feel that it's going to be a long process. So
thank you.
I'm walking that very thin line right there, but I just don't want it to be where we give you data, we give you some of what Baker considers their IP, intellectual property, or it's proprietary, and then we run into another. Just making sure that it's another issue down the road, and we can hear fully from what you guys recommend
Thank you.
and suggest.
Typically when product, at least with our firm, when it is provided to the client or the township, it becomes the property of the township and is no longer proprietary. However, we have also accommodated in our scope of work to hold the meetings and the stakeholder meetings and focus groups so that we're also hearing from the key stakeholder groups that are identified by the township.
Bill, do we still have the volunteer committee established, and is it fully manned?
Yeah, so President Maroney reached out to the committee members asking which ones would like to stay on. So she has that feedback. I think for the most part, the committee is intact. That is one of the early checklist items we have with FHI, should the board approve this tonight, is to nail that down.
Okay. And you mentioned the importance of being at the Fall Festival. Can you elaborate on that? Like, why is that a key date that you need to be at?
When we embark on a new initiative, the outreach early in the process is critically important, and we want to take outreach opportunities to the public where they are. When we were reviewing various fall activities, this presented itself as an ideal opportunity. It's sponsored by the township. It's in downtown Wayne. It's a Sunday afternoon. We're going to be hearing from a broad perspective of local constituents, and it's a great early win, we feel, in terms of letting people know about the project that's underway and how they can get involved. We'll also have interactive online activities with a virtual workshop, and it's a way to let people know that they can participate online as well. But we believe a combination of in-person and online is really ideal.
All right, thanks. And then my last question has to do with the vote we took earlier tonight on Garrett Hill. John, how does that vote, so if that passes, how does that impact the work they do? So if they were to, as part of their focus groups, if they were looking at the community and they get to Garrett Hill and they wanted to look at outdoor dining or what the future looks like in that neighborhood, what impact are we having on their work or the future of that neighborhood by voting and approving that ordinance change?
Well, understand what FHI is going to be doing is doing a comprehensive plan, which is a broad, high-level look at, where do you want to see certain types of projects? What do you need to do? There'll be some recommendations. There won't be zoning ordinances that they're going to prepare. They're not going to do that. So, and it's going to take a number of years. So they'll have if the Garrett Hill outdoor dining goes forward, they'll have, that to wrap into the broad overview of the Garrett Hill district and outdoor dining and other uses. So I don't see it really as affecting what they're doing at all because, you may have some other zoning amendments that come along while they're in process. When they're done, I expect there'll be substantial zoning amendments that'll have to be done because your zoning ordinance, as you all know, and I've said this 100 times, is about 30 years old or more. I mean, it's one of the original, I call it the nesting zoning ordinances, where you have an R1, you can do certain things, and you have an R2, you can do additional things, plus all those things in the R1. And that's like the original, at least in Pennsylvania, the zoning ordinances that came out in the 70s. That's what you have. We've tweaked it. Since I've been here over the years, we've added some things to deal with, some issues, some problems. So I don't see any zoning amendments or anything that this board would do because there's going to be an overall updating of the ordinances once they're done with the comp plan. That's the first step.
Okay, and for the record, I'm not opposed to outdoor dining. What I don't want to do is piecemeal and make decisions up here now when we're hiring you to do and give us recommendations. So just to go back, if we were to approve outdoor dining, nothing's grandfathered in. Like if they were to come back and say Garrett Hill is not suitable for outdoor dining or it's not recommended, we haven't.
Well, if you have an outdoor dining ordinance on the books for Garrett Hill, I mean, you have it now for other areas of the township.
Right.
And remember that proposed amendment also provides for outdoor dining in other zoning districts where it doesn't currently exist, and it also provides for outdoor dining for pre-existing non-conforming uses where they currently can't do that. So it wasn't just a Garrett Hill outdoor dining ordinance. Some of the commissioners that have, I think, the PLO zoning, it's provided for in there. So it was broadened beyond just Garrett Hill. Garrett Hill was the initial 2 years ago
Sure,
amendment.
right.
This added in different wards of the township where there's existing restaurants that opportunity. So if somebody goes in and does outdoor dining under that ordinance or any ordinance, yes, they're grandfathered in. They will continue, but then you're making an assumption that we're going to change that down the road based on what the plan, what the comp plan's going to look like. And I can't imagine that particular type of use, is going to change where you have existing restaurants. There may be some regulations that come out of comp plan, but they're just doing the broad overview of development, existing, proposed. There's about 10 elements in the MPC in Article 3 for comp plans. You have to look at water, you have to look at sewer, you have to look at traffic, you look at zoning, you look at school, you look at natural resources. There's a whole laundry list. I'd invite everybody to look at, I think it's Article 3 of the MPC that lists everything that they'll need to put together. The comp plans I've seen recently, there's a chapter on each one of those elements. And you can have other elements. You're not limited by what's in the MPC. So, anyway, did I answer your question?
I think so. Appreciate it. And final question, can you just walk through your public meetings? Like, how do you envision structuring those? Is it going to be by neighborhood? Is it going to be like community-wide meetings?
Right, so we have a virtual public workshop that we are going to go live with before we go out for that first outreach event. So we have that touch point to connect people with. And just to add on to Leslie's point earlier, that first engagement, we use, online, we use in person, and it's really to get the word out more than anything. Because once people have that idea and they know that this is happening, they're not going to come back 5 months later and feel left out and not trust the process. We want to bring people in from the beginning. But yeah, so our virtual workshop is really aimed to get a wide cross-section of the township. And then with our public workshop, we go after we've gone to the pop-up events to analyze the recommendations or the results from the virtual workshop, to then create sort of a draft set of recommendations based on what we've heard. And there we'll invite all the different neighborhoods and try to get as much attendance as we can. But then we supplement that with the pop-up events. And we have our contingency budget to really adjust along the way as needed. So if, we're finding that we're not hearing from a certain demographic, or there is a community that we're not meeting through what we've already decided or, proposed as our engagement, we go and find a way to connect with them. And that we, rely on community leaders, we rely on the township to tell us either this group and this is how the best way to reach them.
So can we expect to see you in our neighborhoods, or?
Yes.
And how would that look?
How would that look?
Door to door?
Well, I think as part of the contingency plan, depending on the outreach to date, and we have different analytics that we can assess which neighborhoods we might not be hearing from, then we would work with the project team to identify whether that would take place as a key stakeholder meeting, and it would be then working with the steering committee and with members of the wards to tell us who we should meet with and identify the best venue to reach out. So that might be a meeting that's held in a local library, or it would not necessarily be that we'd be walking door to door to knock, because we're being efficient with resources and trying to reach as many people as possible. So that would be a better opportunity for us to meet in a targeted setting.
All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any public comment? All right. We should vote on whether or not to authorize. All in favor of authorization? Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item is item H. It's a discussion and direction on community funding, a community funding grant model. Commissioner Abel and Bill, I don't know, Bill, you want to start us off? And
Yeah, I can help lead in and then hand it off to the board from there. What was included in the board's packet for tonight's meeting is a draft resolution along with an exhibit that does our best job in summarizing the feedback we received from the conversations that the commissioners were having and putting something together. So the goal with tonight's discussion would be to hear from the commissioners any amendments that should be made to the drafts that were provided, and then follow back up at the next meeting with a final draft of whatever it is the board wants to consider.
if I might, before we go too far down the garden path, can I do any public participation first?
No, it's fine. If we're not voting, we can, but we shouldn't respond directly back to them. We're not voting on this. Typically, you don't want public comment first because we want to speak to it and then the public can say something. But that's why you have commissioner comment. So I could say something, and if they don't like it, they can say, that's ridiculous or that's great. But if they come first and just speak and they don't know what we're saying afterwards, and they can't say that's a good idea or a bad idea. You can do it in any order because we're not voting, but if we were voting, you do need that. We're not, so however you want.
I just think once the commissioners get going, sometimes we'll
Sometimes.
funnel things.
Hi, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne Avenue. Sean, your point's well taken. I would be fine either way. Just having the public comment, even though it's not a vote, is useful, I think, on this item. First, thanks for putting this together. This is, some of you have been dealing with this for a number of years. I've been dealing with this for 20, trying to get a template or a process around it, so I'm very appreciative of what's before the board now for direction. If I'm reading this correctly, I believe this would be implemented in January of next year for the 2025 budget, I think the way it is. So we would still continue with whatever current process we do for this, if that could be addressed when we get the comments, which I think makes sense because we're kind of late in the process to have people make a different submission. Just a few observations and tweaks on the focus areas where it's in addition to basic needs and social services. It has 4 bullet points: arts, humanities, capital improvements, environment, green space, and historic preservation. Capital improvement sounds more like something one of the organizations would do, not what their purpose is. So I would be taking that out because it's also addressed later on in terms of what priorities would be given to those. And to the extent it's not included in what basic needs and social services are, I don't know, health and human services, if you have something like the Women's Resource Center, for example, and also even to include some other government type things, which might be like animal welfare or something, because I think we're just kind of opening this up to any of the 501c3s in Radnor and let the committee decide what to do. So I would substitute that in if that would be helpful. I certainly agree that the library, fire company, and senior center should be outside of this. That's not really a grant. Those are more for the operating expenses. However, for the Memorial Day Parade, Garrett Hill, 4th of July Parade, and the Music Fest, my preference would be to actually have them be a part of this umbrella, but exempt perhaps like the parades from that hiatus that has to be taken after 3 years, because we do tend to fund those each year. But that way, everybody's operating in the same playing field. So outside of the major ones that we do in a different manner, everybody falls under this for consideration each year. And also that way, they also have to, abide by the criteria here in terms of the budget and providing that, so we can look at those things. If the way it's written now, I'm looking at the amount, which is the 100,000. The way it's written now, in terms of the organizations that would qualify, that aren't explicitly excluded or would have to meet the criteria, this year we're only giving out 65,000 based upon that. So the 100,000 seems like a bit. I mean, we're almost a 50% increase in what we're doing. If we rolled the Garrett Hill Parade, the Memorial Day Parade, and the Music Fest in what we're giving this year, it would be like, I think, 93,000, so we'd be closer to 100. But I think we need to look at that number based upon what we're including and excluding, both explicitly excluding and well as what the criteria says. And I think, let's see if there's anything else. No, but I really appreciate trying to put a process around this, and hopefully this will come into being. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public participation on this? All right, Commissioner comments. Jake, you want to start us off?
Sure, and I appreciate that. First, I want to emphasize that this was a bipartisan effort, and want to thank, she's absent tonight, but I do want to thank my colleague, Commissioner Mulroney, for sitting down, for her time and her efforts to hash out this draft. It was a compromise. I came to the meeting with a certain set of criteria. She had a certain set of criteria, and we were able to work through those issues, and that's the draft you have before you. As Mr. Gemmer highlighted, I think the draft, the purpose of this tries to accomplish 5 things, which we've discussed over the 6 years I've been on this board. One, it sets some monetary limits with what we authorize and appropriate to community organizations. A second thing, it identifies township values, and I'll agree with Mr. Gemmer again. Health and Human Services would be appropriate for that to replace the bullet point that he highlighted, because capital improvements are noted later in the draft. It establishes criteria for the award. We sit up here all the time and talk about having people come in and talk about their budgets and where they want to use the funding for. This would memorialize it. It would set it up as part of the formula and the criteria to come in and request the award. And I think one of the more important things out of this, it establishes a subcommittee that'll evaluate the requests, and I think that's something that we've missed on this board, and it'll help that subcommittee start earlier in the process. So when we start doing budget discussions in October, we'll be ahead of the game, and we'll be ready to have those discussions, know who has requested funding, what their need is, what initiatives they want to put forth, and be ready to vote. So we're not sitting up here arguing over the amount. So I think, all in all, it's a great compromise. It's a bipartisan effort, and appreciate Commissioner Mulroney for her time and efforts on this, and I will be supporting this draft when it comes forth as a resolution.
I'd like to make a quick comment. I think the one side of this we haven't talked about at all is that this could really excite some organizations within the township that haven't previously applied for grants, didn't know they could. It's always been this close circle of groups that have applied for grants. And we are stating in the in this document that these would be Radnor-based groups. So I think it can only be sort of exciting and good for the township in that respect.
And just a comment to that is, and I agree with you, but it also not only excites, but it should provide the opportunity. So with this draft, we put a 3-year, so you can receive funding for 3 consecutive years, but then you have to take a year hiatus, which opens up appropriations for other organizations that may have been rejected or denied 1 year. You're going to get an opportunity to continue to request funding, and certain organizations, they may receive it 3 years, but they'll have to take that 4th year off, and then they can reapply that 5th year.
Any other commissioner comment?
Yeah, I don't think that this is bad. I do have concerns, and you have to refresh my memory. When you say they have to be in Radnor, so like I get it, but like take Surrey Services, groups that may be based primarily out but help a little bit in,
I don't want to say the SBCA based in media, but, you know, or whatever. But they may do events here or help out police or whatever. So just how is that going to work? Is that in there, or is that is in there? You have that down. And then how does this affect the music festival? Because if they, and that's my big thing. Some groups can live without the parades can live without the $5,000. I think that's easy to raise, but a group that such as or an entity that needs basically a lot of the funding, and how you price the police and the public works on top of that, how is that going to affect? I mean, we going to have a music festival 3 out of every 4 years? I'm just curious.
Right now, the way it's written, the Music Fest and the parades are not under the umbrella of this grant.
And the police, so what would be under the umbrella? What, Surrey Services, what?
Well, Surrey Services is not based in Radnor,
So
but it would be the senior center, the
Art Center.
The art center. Not the senior center. The senior center is not. It's one of the ones, like the library, the fire department, and the
So
senior
it's
center
cut
that would
out.
be
It's carved
that are
out.
carved
It's-
out.
'cause
Sorry,
it's-
I misspoke. I
'cause
was thinking the art center.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, because it's considered
Yeah.
almost like a necessity of the township.
And then it would be who applied. And I think that's what I find exciting about it, is we could get some turnover and some new
Blood.
deserving blood.
Okay.
But I think Commissioner Fari has a point on the Music Fest, and it's a discussion that we should have as a board, as well as the parades. I mean, this is part of the compromise. I would like to see them under the umbrella. I'm okay with exempting the parades, but I do think the Music Fest has to fall and meet the same criteria as the other community organizations. So they'd be allowed 3 consecutive years and would be exempt the 4th. Or they would be prohibited the 4th.
So is this going to arrange or make it possible that, like, the music festival is going to say, hey, we need 90,000 every year, and they're only going to spend 75,000, socking away 3 years of, so then they have that amount.
No.
I mean, like, because like that's the other thing that I worry about, because we're not going to get into their books, and I don't. I hear what you're saying. I do like the idea of fresh blood, but I don't. It's called I forget what it's called when you. What do you call that? When you. When you go under the like the $7,000. Like if you had 4. Smurfing. Oh yeah. So when you go right under and then they don't use that and then they have like a free year. I'm not saying they're going to do that. I just look at, what the potential issues could be with that.
No, part of the criteria is the groups requesting funding would have to come before the subcommittee, and they would have to provide some of that, they would have to open the books and provide those details. Second, and I mean, I've seen so many drafts. I think there is a limit of one organization can only receive 25% of the annual funding.
Commissioner, that's correct. That is in there.
And then when is the cutoff date going to be? Like October, July,
The provision as written now is an organization should not receive more than 25% of the aggregate annual budget amount for the grant program. However, in any given year, the grant committee can evaluate and recommend otherwise should extenuating circumstances exist. So ultimately, to come back to the board for that discretion.
So they have to come back. Well, they have to come back anyway, correct? So if you voted, so who approves this?
The board subcommittee will make a recommendation to the full board, who will vote officially on the distribution of funds.
Boards? I guess my question, yeah, so, but with that caveat in there, that extra language, like, then why? Like, it's not, they don't have to come back twice. is
I
what I'm
think
saying.
the point was there could be an extenuating circumstance where this year the art center needs a new roof, and they
Okay.
need extra money.
Okay, I just feel that, like, that exception may be used more. That exception won't be the exception. It could potentially turn around being the norm.
Well, that would be
That's my issue.
evaluated by the committee and then recommended to the board, who would vote on it. Any other comment? Do you feel like we got what we need for direction?
Yeah, it sounds like for now, we'll keep the draft written as is, and then as we head toward the next meeting, if there are any additional conversation pieces or things that we want to amend, we can certainly footnote those ahead of the next agenda.
Well, I mean, I don't think I heard from everybody, like, do we want to keep those groups exempt, or do we want to put them under the umbrella now?
It's on page 1.
No, I know they're exempt in the draft. I'm saying my preference is those groups are not exempt and they are under the umbrella. And they'd have to, we can either give a special exemption to the parades, but they would still account toward that final number. But I do believe the Music Fest has to come and come before the board every year as the other community orgs do.
Jake, could you just say, like, every 4 years, like, if you need a year off, let's say the parades, and I know it's minimal, but you could even do it with the music festival. So we're going to fund the parade 5,000, 5,000, 5,000. So instead of a year off, if they want it and you agree, it's cut in half, and then it's 5,000, 5,000, 5,000. So it's not necessarily where it's like cold turkey, but you're still giving, say, like the music festival, maybe 50,000 of the 100 or 90, so they can still do it, and then they're going to have to raise. So they don't have a year of not doing it, but again, it teaches them maybe how to fundraise, and then they can work on their fundraising as well. So it does put some of the onus, as the conversations that we had before, where you're like, why are we paying for all this? Why are we paying for this? All right, like, we shouldn't just give them money, right? Give them, but let's see what they can do with their fundraising. So it's not that it stopped, but let's see what they can, because maybe the next year their fundraising is great, and they don't need to come to us, right? It's the whole give a man a fish versus giving him the rod.
If they don't come to us, that's their year off.
Yeah, but if they don't come to you because they know that they're not going to get approved and then we don't have a music festival, that could be a detriment to Wayne.
Well, I think every organization that comes before the board requesting the funds has to take that all into account.
Sure, I would just say instead of it being a 0 level, a year off, maybe it could be a reduced rate.
And as Commissioner Meyer said, I think, I mean, the goal is it's going to excite other organizations that come out.
It will, and if you reduce the music festival from 100,000 to 50,000, then there's 50,000 more, and you still get the music festival. And if the music festival can't come through and raise the money, then they have to give it back. So that's what I would do, and you're still getting new blood, you're still getting new projects, but you're helping other projects that, the legacy keep continuing. Like, you don't want to see a 10-year music festival stop because of this, or you don't want to see the Garrett Hill Parade, which is like 75 years, because they didn't get the 5,000. All I'm saying is I don't know if it needs to be 0, but maybe consider reducing that and helping them with fundraising.
So, sorry, when we're throwing around numbers, what did we give the Music Fest?
I'm actually glad you asked that, because there's a couple different numbers thrown around.
20.
So the annual contribution to each of the parades, first of all, is $4,000 a year for a total of 8 for the 2 parades. And then Music Fest this year was $20,000.
But how much was overtime and additional employee? You gave them $20,000 in cash, but what was the
plus
township
police
side?
and public works.
Yeah, what was the township cost with public works and police and?
So for the Music Fest, I think we estimated that around $40,000. But we don't run those numbers for the parades. It's probably not too far off when you throw those into the same type of in-kind contributions through overtime and staffing for those 2 events as well. And that's the nature of the community event. It requires services of the township to make sure that it goes off safely. Versus a contribution to another 501c3 that's not centered around a community event, where you don't have the need for the police and public works to staff it.
And that was taken into consideration, so it purposely didn't refer to in-kind contributions. So even if a parade or a festival were to have to take a year off, in-kind is not touched by this language. So there's still a township contribution regardless.
I'm sure, you asked for suggestions, that's what it was.
So I would make two quick comments. One is if you're going to put the parades under the umbrella, there has to be a caveat that they would get money every year. They wouldn't have the fourth year off, because that's not really, I think what would happen is they'd ask for $10,000 a year before they have the year off, which I suppose is one way to handle it. But it confuses things thoroughly. Music Fest, my concern is both with the timing of applying and getting money, and to the fact that in the past they have made charitable contributions to the Children's Hospital, which this explicitly states there's no through money. So that they'd have to, I guess, consider even before they applied. So I think that's a little bit difficult to work with under this umbrella, but I'm just putting that forward because I think it's something to think about. Anything else? Mr. White, you're good to go then?
Well, I'm still not entirely sure how we're writing up the community event piece of this.
That makes two of us.
Yeah.
It's either as drafted or we amend it to make them part of the program, which sounds like then there'll have to be some other amendments as well to clear up the fourth year and the amounts and those types of debates that we've had.
We've been told point blank by Kenny that they need the assistance of the township, and they're going to need the assistance of the township every year going forward. So having a one-year carve-out for them isn't going to work. So they are going to probably end up going under the same umbrella as the parades, where they get guaranteed funding, because we're also not going to not fund the parades every year. We are absolutely going to fund the Arts Center every year. I just do not believe that an organization that is that clued into the township, not clued in, an organization that is that enmeshed with the township is going to forego $25,000, I think is what we gave them last year. I don't know that they could. I mean, I don't recall exactly, do we own their building and they lease it back from us?
No,
we funded
no.
their building.
Yes, so
and they're paying it back to us.
We borrowed money through our credit and have a repayment agreement with them. So they are paying for that debt. They just used our credit rating, which was offered a lower interest cost to them.
So really
that's the arrangement. They own the building and all of its improvements. We just have a debt repayment schedule with them.
We're the bank.
Yes, for that transaction we would.
And it's like millions of dollars that we spent.
Yeah.
I think we're going to keep giving them the $25,000 every year. I don't think they're going to end up taking a year off, which means that what we're really talking about now is the Radnor Historical Society and Surrey Services.
Only not Surrey, because they're not Radnor-based. Surrey's not Radnor-based.
I suspect that Surrey's going to show up and they're going to ask for an exception because they do work in Radnor. I mean, I'm not saying necessarily that they get the money. I'm just saying that the only two organizations that we're really spending this time talking about is the Historical Society and Surrey Services.
The one other one that the township has contributed to in the past is the Women's Resource Center as well.
That's true. So that's a third. And I think we gave them $5,000 or something.
That is correct.
And last year, the senior center was 15, and we didn't do Surrey Services at all. We kind of sometimes do them.
No,
we did? We
no,
gave
we
them?
cut I think we cut them. We're kind of, I shouldn't say this on
We're in
camera.
and
I think
out.
we're kind of notching them down in light of this proposal.
Yeah. So, I mean, well, it'll come forward as a resolution or it won't, but I would push to have the parades, the Music Fest, the Arts Center be included with all of the other groups. I think they're going to be they're going to be treated that way anyway. I'm not sure that this is really ready for prime time for my own position, for whatever it's worth.
So Commissioner Larkin, what I'm hearing is that you don't agree with the 1 year off, 3 year on, 1 year off, that people should come every year and apply. And they either get it or they don't, but there's no break.
I think that imposing that break does very little, and it will create a lot of problems. I think that everybody ends up getting treated the same. I think that the virtue of this is not that we announce there are certain organizations who get all the money that they want, like the fire company, and others who have to come and dial for dollars for us. Instead, if we're going to do this, we should commit to it where we say to the fire company, we are setting aside either this many dollars or this percentage of our budget or this specific tax spend, which will be a line item on your bill or whatever, but this is the money that we have available and you get this fraction of it. And then the fight is for the subcommittee, the conversation for the subcommittee is what number of percentage points we're willing to move it within a prescribed number. So that way you actually put fiscal discipline on the groups that creep up. We're not hurting in terms of spending money on outside groups because the Radnor Historical Society wants to put together their new wagon. It's because the fire company consistently is having trouble finding people who want to do fire company business with them. They have to pay for people instead of volunteers. If we impose this, then number one, you're right, Baron, we're going to be increasing the dollar figure from $65,000 to $100,000 for a collection of groups that historically have not been the spend for the township. We're going to not actually advance the ball in terms of who we are exercising our discretion in favor of, because the groups that are being singled out by this are ones that will ultimately be, I think, winnowed to the smaller number. But most importantly, we're not imposing any fiscal discipline on the groups that are the big spend. Again, this wasn't my initiative, and I didn't participate in it, and I say that not to distance myself from it, but to say that I didn't take the opportunity that was given to me to say this outside of the meeting, and I get annoyed at other people who don't do that, so shame on me. But those are the issues that I kind of foresee here.
Just a couple thoughts with regard to the entities that we have excluded from this. Another conversation that has taken place in the development of this that hasn't been as formally put together as this is the intention to have those larger funded entities develop multi-year forecasts, come to the Board of Commissioners, present those, and us develop that, lack of a better word, that understanding, that agreement that this is what your funding is going to look like over the next few years. And that we then hold those entities to those funding numbers. Again, aiming at the fiscal accountability commissioner that you're speaking of, versus the year over year kind of walking in here in August saying, here it is, this is what we need. So trying to manage that on a little bit more of a long-term forecasting basis versus through this mechanism. I don't know if that helps or hurts, but that was another conversation we were having at the same time, trying to nail those numbers down a bit.
That would be a welcome change. I think that this is not required in order to do that. And it does feel like we are unnecessarily putting pain on a sort of randomly selected number of groups. I'm not sure why the senior center is singled out and the art center is not. But one board can't bind the future board, which means that even if they came to us, if the fire company comes to us and says, this is our plan for the next 5 years, if the library comes to us and says, this is the plan for the next 5 years, then the next year they show up and say, there was a leak and the roof needs to be replaced, or the fire engine exploded because there was some kind of weird chemical, probably at my house, then we're going to have to fund it. So
I do think it's a good idea to have 5, 10, even 25-year plan.
Sure.
To know how old the roof is, even in this building or whatever. And it should be for all those spots. Just because it is going to eventually need a new roof, fire truck or whatever.
I thought we tried to do that, and I thought some of these groups were like, well, we can't really go into their books. Like, these are like segregated. I mean, then to a certain extent, let's look at the Willows, for instance, as well. Because that is kind of a quasi, we own the park, they own the building, or they lease the building. How much, the question is good after bad, and I think by the time we're done, we're gonna be in the same spot where we are, where we may have $5,000, and we're like, all right, we don't need a committee we gotta fund Group A and Group B and the essentials, and then the other essentials, like realistically, how much, to Jack's point, how much are we gonna have left? And then it's not fair to those smaller groups who don't have the lawyer, the lawyers and the accountants that can really present something that are the larger groups, like the fire, and they have the community-based and the big boards as opposed to the smaller. Sorry, it's late, and I'm blanking a little bit on what I want to say, but that's, yeah, I'm kind of, yeah, I don't know if you can say, it's hard to say yep, no, and then what happens if you have another group that does something similar, and then, so you have, the WXPN music group, and then MMR says, oh, well, they don't want to do it, we'll do it. And then it's hard, I would need to see more on this for me to feel comfortable, but I think if you make, it's hard because you can come back as another 503C in theory. It's like if you have a developer that you don't like, for instance, and you don't like developer X, and his company is, Jim Smith. Well, Jim Smith can come back and change his LLC, and now it's just Smith Inc. How are we really going to police that? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think that will happen for less than $100,000 of funding, and I also think the smaller
I'm
organizations.
throwing all this stuff out there. You can do what you want with it.
Yeah, the smaller organizations don't have terribly complicated books like the fire department and the library and whatnot.
That's even harder because they don't have, their books aren't terribly complicated, but they may not be able to show them and get all the data when we need it because they don't have access to those resources where they have people in their organizations that are maybe accountants or lawyers or that do the stuff for free is what I'm saying. A board of 5 and a board of 30, you're going to have more resources. And again, it's the fat cats get fatter and the smaller.
Well, it sounds as if we're not going anywhere with it right now. I think what we need to do is potentially send feedback that you have in an email form or whatever form to Bill, and Maura and Jake and Bill can sit down and look at it and see if there's any consistency. Is that okay? I mean, I don't know.
Fair
I don't
enough.
know
It's probably not a bad idea for commissioners to talk amongst themselves as well to make sure that if there are conflicts within those, how we're going to resolve those.
Absolutely. Well, I think what you'll do is resolve things and then it'll come back here. But I think it's good to get the major issues down on paper. So we'll be looking for them, Commissioner Farhi. All right, moving on. The final item I is Resolution 2023-70, authorization to award construction contract B-23-005 for Ithan Valley Park Bridge Culvert and Arch Rehabilitation to J.D. Ekman Incorporated to include contingency and construction, administration, and inspection in the total amount of $660,000 to be funded from the Stormwater Fund. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
A second. Mr. Norsini?
Thank you, Commissioner. So this bridge was damaged in Ida, so it's been a few years in going through permitting and getting the bidding documents together. This will rehabilitate the entire bridge, the pointing, and as noted, so the actual contract is around $500,000. The balance of 660 is the contingency and estimated inspection costs. So the engineering department respectfully requests that this board approve this contract.
Any board comment?
Couple questions. That is a beautiful cast iron fence. I know part of it has been damaged by trees. Are you able to salvage that? Because those hollow ones don't look as good and they're not as pretty. That is a very valuable, very pretty old rustic fence.
I don't know
love
that-
looking at it when I drive by.
So I don't know that we'll be touching that fence for this.
Okay.
If we do, it has to be replaced. Or
With cast iron, not the faux stuff that looks like it's cast iron and
no,
it's really
what
aluminum?
would happen is whatever is removed would have to be put back.
Okay. And then the other thing too is with the stormwater, a lot of this damage, some of the damage to the fence and to that area, because it is a wooded area, are the trees. And some of those trees are dead. I don't know if they've been axed, but I drive by there almost every day. So would there be any kind of tree removal? And I don't want this to turn into a...
So Commissioner, that's a maintenance item.
Okay.
Right? And we did take trees. About 2 years ago, I had our arborist go through there because
Okay.
the wall was damaged. So this is a capital project specific to the bridge. That's a maintenance item. We can gladly bring our, like I said, we did take trees down there about a year and a half ago for just that reason.
Sure. I don't, like I said, I'm not trying to have it be Fenimore, but if you don't shore up some of those trees and really put a good buffer of, I don't want to say open space, but non-treed area, like you don't want to
We only
spend a
touch,
lot. Okay.
we only touch the ones that are in decline.
Okay.
So the healthy ones that we don't feel are
Then-
gonna fall,
Okay.
stay.
And then you're going to keep that nice field stone as well, or is it going to be more of a modern type of bridge?
So no, the bridge isn't getting replaced, it's getting repaired.
Okay.
So what'll happen is the exact same stone that's there stays there, it gets repointed, and work gets done to the arch, to the barrel, we call it, underneath.
Okay. And then, sorry, one more question. The waterfall there, are you going to do anything to?
No, that's, this is solely specific to the
Because-
bridge.
Okay.
Just quickly on those questions, there is a significant line item in our unfunded capital project list that includes stream bank rehabilitation in that area to shore up the stream banks and keep it away from the road for the long term. And some of those other items that, Commissioner, that you pointed out would be included in that type of project where the fence is relooked at, the tree, the health of the tree situation in that park would be evaluated, and a number of other things that the Friends of the Park have identified through the years as well.
Okay. You'd have to do with the EPA, with Pennsylvania, dealing with that waterfall, correct?
So
that's
the
a whole
stream
other
bank,
animal.
We
Yeah.
put that in our pollution reduction plan to DEP, hasn't been approved yet.
Okay.
That's a 7-figure project.
Oh, at least, yeah.
So that does become a capital project.
Got it.
Mr. Norsini, is it both bridges or just the one?
It'll be this one, and then I hate to say, probably in the future, we will be coming back to you to do similar work to the other one.
Okay. Thanks.
Any public comment?
Well,
Oh,
just real quick, if you're going to do, if you already know you're going to do both bridges, is there cost savings to do them all at once? Both
So
at once?
This bridge was damaged to the point that we had to close it, right? So if this bridge is closed, we haven't evaluated the other one yet, but it wasn't, let me back up. We evaluated it after the severe storm, but we go through all our bridges. So I guess I should have been more specific. In the next year, 2 years, 3 years, we may be doing this work to that bridge. It's not an immediate thing. If it was, we would have bid them together, said fix one, then fix the other.
Still, your wording is will likely be back there.
It might be 5 years, 3 years, I don't know. I wish I had rephrased that. So Commissioner, just know, if it was something very short-term, we would bid them together. This is not that short-term, but eventually we will be back. They're old stone arch bridges.
So when was the last evaluation?
Ida, and that bridge was not at the point. The other bridge, the entrance bridge, was not at the point of having to be repaired like
All
that.
right, well, it sounds like maybe we should reevaluate it now.
Well, we are, because we had the 5-inch storm on July 9th, where Gannett Fleming did our culvert evaluations. We'll be back before this board for them to go through them again, right? A lot of our bridges are called extreme scour bridges. We're required to review them after those kinds of storms. So this is what we do, right? We will be looking for them. So if I could take back that statement, because I think you took it the wrong way, I would. What I'm saying is any stone arch masonry bridge is always a candidate for repair. Whether it be 5 years, 2 years, I don't know. But if we had known when we did the other one that the entrance bridge needed it, rest assured we would have bid them together.
Any other commissioner comment? Public comment? All right, let's take a vote. All in favor? Aye. Okay, moving on. Any reports of board liaisons? I know most have been on holiday for the summer, but no? What? Okay. New business? Old business?
Yep, just one item. Mr. Norsini, a few months back, I think we approved a group to do a modernized lightscape plan, replace the poles. I think we approved. Do we have an update on that schedule?
I will pass that on to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Tate, that project falls under.
Thank you. This is for the LED program?
Right, LED, that's right.
Yep, the contract with, the contractor for DVRPC has been working in the township with doing an inventory. They'll have those results in August is when they told us, so I'm expecting by the end of the month we'll have a report on the full inventory. We'll come back before the board to move towards the construction phase, the replacement phase, which was expected to take about 6 to 8 weeks, and the entire township will be completed at that point in time. So we are close to coming back before the board with a report to move into the next phase of the project.
Okay, so we can expect to see that September?
I expect September. We'll follow up with the firm who's doing the work and see where they are with the inventory part of it, and then circle back.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And any final public participation? Motion to adjourn? Second? I wanted to do